you just co-authored a book with Sam Harris. I had Sam on the show a couple weeks ago. It's called Islam and the Future of Tolerance. So first off, I think people would love to know a little bit more about the nature of your relationship with Sam, how you guys came together. Sam, of course, is a devout atheist. You're a practicing Muslim, correct?
I don't call myself religious or devout. I'm a Muslim, but I wouldn't want to hold myself up as any form of standard for anyone to judge the religion by or anything else.
Well, there you go. So that said, tell me a little bit about how you got connected with Sam and what sort of brought you two together to really go ahead and start doing things like this.
So Sam and I first met a few years ago when I came to New York, where I am right now, to debate Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And the motion of the debate was Islam is a religion of peace. And there's something I need to clarify with that debate, is that I've never believed, say never, sorry, in my current incarnation after leaving Hizb ut-Tahrir, I've not believed that Islam is a religion of war or peace. And this is something I explained at the beginning of my dialogue with Sam. I chose the side of that motion, that Islam is a religion of peace, because there was a motion, and I had to choose whether it was a religion of war or peace and pick a side. I think that the motion was worded incorrectly, frankly. You know, I either a religion of war nor peace. It's just a religion, and religions are interpreted. But nevertheless, I sat on the side that it was a religion of peace because I logically reasoned in my mind that if the majority of Muslims today aren't jihadist, albeit many, many, many Muslims are not liberal in the way I'd like, they're certainly not jihadist terrorists. And so if religion is what people make it, if Islam is what Muslims interpret it to be, then by definition it's a religion of peace simply because Muslims, by the overwhelming majority, are not terrorists. So I sat on that side of the debate and I debated Ayaan. Afterwards, we ended up in a dinner afterwards, and Sam happened to be there, and I hadn't met him before. And he was called upon by Ayaan to ask me a question. And he asked me, he said, look, it's all good and well you being out there and needing to present this view to the public about Islam being this or that, but here between us in the privacy of this dinner, can't you just be honest with us and tell us that what you really think about the fact that Islam is a barbaric religion? So my immediate reaction was to say to him, are you accusing me of lying? What do you mean, can I not be honest with you? Are you implying that I wasn't honest outside there on the platform? Yeah. And it became a very hostile exchange, which ended there. It didn't go any further, and everyone was a bit embarrassed around the table. It didn't really develop beyond that point. And then we didn't speak for a couple of years. And so then Sam reached out to me when I think he'd watched me at the Richmond Forum when I was reunited again with Ayaan. This time, the good thing was it wasn't a debate. It was a conversation. And that's actually the Richmond Forum. I want to thank, if the people from the Richmond Forum are watching this, I want to thank them because the format that they got, the same moderator, John Donovan, who had moderated the debate at the Intelligence Squared earlier occasion. But instead, they got Ayaan, myself, and Imam Rauf, who had been the Imam of the main Manhattan Mosque. And instead of having a motion to debate, they just said, all of you we only had to have a conversation. So that really allowed for me to be in the middle, because Imam Rauf was arguing Islam as a religion of peace. Ayaan was arguing it's not, that it's a religion of war instead. And it allowed me in the center to say, guys, actually, Ayaan's got something right and you've got something right, and there's actually something in the middle here. And I think that conversation really set the precedent for what happened with Sam and me afterwards, because I think he saw that. I think Ayaan was really impressed with the tone that I took with her in that conversation. And I was really happy with the way in which she reciprocated my overtures to her. And I think that really laid the foundations for what happened next. And then Sam reached out to me and said, hey, can we kind of have that type of conversation for my blog? Because, he interviews people on his podcast, he publishes it on his blog. So I said, well, yeah, sure. And we sort of had this exchange over the phone, and he transcribed it. And I said, Sam, this is actually really good. I don't think you should put it on your blog. I actually sense this is a book that could really influence a lot of people. And so then he approached Harvard, and thank God the editor-in-chief at Harvard agreed, and that's the story of the book, which hits the shelves in a week.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about Sam in a second, but I think something interesting that you said about Ayaan is that, so I think a lot of your critics, or a lot of the people that are critical of everyone on your side of this, is that you guys all think exactly the same thing. But so I'm fascinated that, so you and Ayan actually don't agree on certain elements of this.
Well, you see, that's the laziness and the knee-jerk reaction, the emotional reaction, which is born of fear, the fear of dialogue and the fear of actually having conversations with people that we may disagree with, is that actually the best way to ignore the consequences that dialogue can work is to tarnish everyone with the same brush,
Yeah.
and is to, in fact, effectively slander everyone. And that way, we are justifying to ourselves and those who are listening to us why dialogue isn't a good thing. The truth is that even after this dialogue with Sam, there are probably many things that he and I don't see eye to eye on, and with Ayan as well.
Right.
And but the important thing is in recognizing that dialogue is a process. It's not you don't just snap your fingers and somebody agrees with you. And democracy itself, by the way, liberal democracies weren't born in a day. The reason why we use the word mature democracies when we refer to countries like the United States and the United Kingdom is because they've had centuries over which time they've matured. And that's what to use that analogy, that's exactly what a dialogue with people you disagree with is, that it matures over time.
Right. So there's been a bunch of people. You can name them if you like. We've talked about them a lot here, and I'm almost tired of talking about them at this point, who are writing some pretty horrific things about you. The worst kind of slanderous stuff, calling you names that if anyone on the right called you, they'd be condemned, and rightfully so. And I'm seeing so much of this coming from the left. And these are the people who I thought would be the ones standing up for all the things that you're talking about here, the words that you're talking about, conversation, liberalism, all of these things, and you're getting it from the left. What do you make about that?
So, let's move away from the individuals and look at the movement. And the individuals, at the end of the day, whatever they say about me and wherever they are in their views, they certainly weren't as bad as I was when I was a revolutionary Islamist. So I hope they can change.
Wow, you're a good guy. You're a good guy.
Well, I believe in change, and I hope that people adapt. And if they do change their views, I'd be perfectly happy to continue being friends with them. I mean, Reza Aslan used to sit on my organisation's board in London as a member of our advisory council. And we disbanded it 2 years into founding our organisation, so it hasn't existed for about 5 years. But we used to know the guy. We invited him to London he's spoken at my offices in London at Quilliam. So people change, and I'm hoping that we can resume a cordial form of relationship with all of these guys. And I just think that if I can go from where I was to where I am, I have faith in humanity. But it is important to talk about the concepts, because that's the only way people do change, by the way, is when, as happened with me, is when those ideas are challenged. In a way that tries, and it's difficult, we're all human beings, we all have emotions, we all have egos, but in a way to challenge those ideas without making about the ego, but actually just really making it about the concepts themselves. And so what you've referred to is what I've come to refer to as the regressive left. And what I mean by the regressive left is because not all people on the left wing are regressive leftists, just like not all Muslims are Islamists. And so what I mean by the regressive left is this phenomenon of people on the left wing of the debate who see between their duty, their ideological duty to challenge foreign policy mistakes, American and British foreign policy mistakes, so what they interpret as colonialism and neocolonialism and neoconservatism. They see it as their duty to challenge this, and then they see another challenge, which is theocracies and the Islamist ideology, and they have come to the view that you can't challenge both of these together, because if you were to challenge Islamist theocracy, you're supporting neoconservative foreign policy. So in their minds, they've prioritized. They've said, neoconservative foreign policy is a bigger evil. Organized violence and chaos in the form of military invasions is worse than randomized non-state actor violence and chaos. So we're going to go after, they believe they're engaged in a war. We're going to go after this is their mindset, we're going to go after the organized violence. And the reason why sometimes you see duplicity in their statements is because they genuinely believe it's an ideological war. And so it's necessary to even engage in propaganda to defeat this bigger evil that they believe in, which is the organized violence and war. Now, and so why I call them regressive is because in doing so, they make alliances with some of the most regressive,
Yeah.
theocratic, fascist, totalitarian, barbaric, murdering and justifiers of murderous regimes across the world, right? So, whether it's Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that's currently fighting alongside the dictator Assad to fight with against the Syrian people. And the reason I use the example of Hezbollah because the man who's just been elected to the Labour Party leadership in the United Kingdom, who's actually born of this regressive left phenomenon, has been historically has been very close to groups such as supporters of groups such as Hezbollah. And that's why I'm citing this example. So whether it's Hezbollah or whether it's Hamas, on the one hand, I can see the frustration of people who want a two-state solution,
Sure.
which includes a secure, free and independent Israel and a secure and free and independent Palestine. But that frustration shouldn't legitimize supporting an organization that has at the heart of its policy the legitimization of targeting civilians. And so what's happened is why I call them regressive is that they've allied in their anti-colonial prioritization with some of the most regressive theocratic organizations that are out there in the world.
Yeah.
And then they feel that anyone who criticizes those organizations is by definition with the neoconservatives, so they must attack them. And that's what's going on. And I take the view that actually you can criticize. I oppose the Iraq war and the invasion of Iraq from my jail cell in Egypt. I have never supported the invasion of Iraq. I've never supported neoconservatism. I'm a member of the Liberal Democrats in the UK. I've never been a member of any conservative party. I've never been a conservative or supporter of wars in that sense in my life. So you can oppose those things. At the same time, you can oppose theocratic fascism. We can hold two thoughts at the same time, and it's not impossible to do, and I encourage everyone to try it.
Yeah, I love how you wrap that together because you're right, it's two thoughts at the same time. And when I talked about this with Sam, he was saying that they want to find this nugget in you, and once they find this thing that they say you have, not that you say you have it, but that they say you have, then it somehow discounts every other liberal principle that you have, which is why suddenly I'm hearing from them that they'll call Bill Maher is suddenly a neocon. Bill Maher, who has, I think, stood for every liberal principle, been against every war that I can possibly think of. And I have a suspicion that, unfortunately, what these guys are doing, I think for the reasons that you laid out very well, I think they're actually strengthening the extremists on both sides. Right? Because they're strengthening the Islamist extremists because they're not challenging them, and then they're strengthening the secular extremists because they're making it seem like there's this one set of ideas that can't be talked about, and secular people want to talk about all ideas, right? Well,
if we and I've come to refer to this as the Voldemort effect. It's the Harry Potter books in which she devises this really clever mechanism that the people in the story are so fearful of the evil Voldemort that two things happen. One, they can't, they don't believe Voldemort is actually alive. They think he's dead, and they refuse to accept anyone that's telling them that Voldemort still lives. And the second is that they're so petrified of this Voldemort, who they believe is dead, that they can't even name him. So they refer to him as he who must not be named. So that's what I mean as the Voldemort effect. And that leads to, when you can't name something that actually is staring at you in the face, and you're so scared of it that you deny it exists and you don't want to name it, that increases the hysteria. So, when President says we must defeat the evil ideology, well, which evil ideology?
Right.
And so then the average dude that stands up in Donald Trump's rally and says, when are we going to deal with America's Muslim problem? Or Carson, who says, he doesn't want a Muslim president. When they say these things, because the evil ideology, when they hear that word, what they mean by that is Islam, and by default, every Muslim who identifies with Islam.
Yeah.
Which is why they don't want a Muslim president. So what we're doing is, by blurring those lines, we're increasing the hysteria and actually the and the bigotry that we're trying to avoid. So what I argue is, for those two reasons, and actually more importantly, to empower reforming Muslim voices within Muslim communities, because the first victims of theocratic fascism will be those Muslims themselves. It will be the Muslim women. It will be the minorities, so the Yazidi women. It will be the Coptic Christians in Egypt. It will be the liberal Muslims. It will be the apostates, the ex-Muslims. It will be the gay Muslims and the lesbian Muslims. These are the ones who first suffer under the yoke of theocratic fascism. We need to also provide them with a lexicon that they can deploy in their own internal reform debates. So if you don't recognize Islamism, what are they going to say is the problem when they're having these debates within their communities? Islam, the religion, that's going to get them killed immediately in the first place. Aside from the intellectual point that what do you mean by Islam, the religion? It's interpreted in a million different ways.
God, that's such a good handle on why this is so difficult, because we're talking about ideas, we're talking about people, we're talking about religion, we're talking about political movements. It's just so much at once. So just to sort of just to bring around this part of it, in terms of dealing with these people, the people that have been writing all these things and all that, how personally exhausting is it for you? Because I see, and I've read, where Sam has said, he's not going to do this anymore. And he said to me even that then suddenly it's like he has to say something, because it's not fun being lied about or slandered or smeared. And as I said before, you in a way get it worse. A tweet by one of these guys just this week to you was about how he's going to report you to the Department of Homeland Security when you come to the United States because he doesn't want an ex-terrorist here. I mean, this is really horrible stuff. How do you just deal with it on the personal level? It's exhausting, right?
You see, the thing with this tweet is it really raises an interesting insight. And again, I hope this guy really changes his approach to this. But the interesting thing this raises is there's a liberal guy who ostensibly opposes profiling at airports, okay? Which, by the way, I've always done. I've always been you can find more that I've done against profiling than any of these voices. If you Google on YouTube, there's a whole debate I've had on BBC Newsnight, which is the flagship news show in the UK, against a left-wing Labour Party member of Parliament who also happens to be Muslim, who was advocating profiling 5 years ago. And I was debating him on that, saying, this is a silly idea. So I've always been against profiling, but so was this guy who sent the tweet you just referred to. Yet what's interesting is suddenly when somebody is breaking out of the groupthink and disassociating themselves with the tribal identity that we use to have this us and them kind of game that we referred to earlier, that you're either with the neocons or you're with us. And that kind of us and them relies on this tribal identity. When someone breaks free from that tribal identity and refuses to belong here or there, suddenly you find it's open season. That all the principles that we use to actually tarnish the neocons, it's the neocons who want to profile Muslims, it's the neocons who are racist, we're using that same racism against those dissenting voices. I was called a porch monkey. Right? I was called a native informant. I was called a house Muslim by white non-Muslims in this instance.
And supposedly reputable people. This isn't just random eggs on Twitter saying this.
No.
Yeah.
These are journalists that work for established organizations and write for established blogs. And then on top of that, you've just mentioned somebody saying, I hope DHS reads, the Department for Homeland Security reads your book before you come to the States, because I don't want an ex-terrorist coming into the United States. And I put aside the fact I was never a terrorist. That's advocating profiling by somebody who literally a day earlier had been on CNN accusing Sam Harris of advocating profiling.
Yeah.
And so it's suddenly what happens is when you break away from that group kind of tribal groupthink, it becomes open season. And that's why I said earlier that I think what's going on here is they genuinely believe they're engaged in a war. And so in a war, all of these tactics become legitimate because the objective is to win. It's not to find the truth. And I think that's part of the problem. It's why I think this dialogue and this conversation is so important.
Yeah.
Because what we do is we break down that hostility. So I keep referring, that's why actually it's a lesson to myself as well. It's so important to remain polite with these guys because whatever they say to me, if I reinforce their notion that they've somehow managed to convince themselves of that this is a war, and if I respond in that manner, they will double down and they will continue to this is a war and that anything is permissible.
Yeah.
So that's why I try and de-escalate it, and I fail sometimes. But it's important for me to keep trying.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I try as well from the little piece of this that I'm part of, and I've tried to engage some of these people in a respectful way. And unfortunately, as Sam has illustrated quite well, it's hard to debate when you have your facts and then the person you're debating is debating what they think you say or what they want you to say, not what you actually say.